Chapter 27. The 28th Spy. The analysts were confident they had identified the mole at last. "The stakes were high," King said. "We could not afford to be wrong. Our credibility for anything would be gone." In the morning they would tell Division 5, the intelligence division at headquarters. But first they would need to share their dramatic conclusion with the Washington field office, known inside the FBI by its initials, WFO. The field office was in charge of the hunt for the mole. Protocol was to brief WFO first, King said, and then Division 5. The two analysts met at WFO with Special Agent Deborah Evans Smith, who supervised the mole hunt as head of the espionage squad at WFO. Smith had studied Russian language and specialized in Russian foreign intelligence cases, first in Los Angeles and then at WFO. Afterwards, the analysts returned to headquarters and briefed Mike Rochford, whose dogged 6-year pursuit of the mole had finally succeeded, despite the carping from many of his colleagues, who said he was wasting the FBI's time and money. He had been turned down by 27 KGB officers who spurned his $1 million offer for information leading to the identity of the mole. The 28th spy was Mr. Pym. He knew the value of what he had. He traded the file for $7 million and a guarantee of protection for himself and his family. The reputation of King and Milburn was still on the line, even after they unmasked Hansen as the mole. "We sent for Hansen's personnel file," King said. "In his application to the FBI, we found he had used Jack Hoshauer as a reference. Any lingering private doubts the analysts might have had were dispelled by the personnel file." On November 22nd, Neil J. Gallagher, the FBI Assistant Director for Intelligence, received his first briefing on the contents of the KGB file. By that time, the two analysts had recognized Hansen's voice on the tape. But additional internal evidence in the file made it plain that the mole was Robert Hansen. Analysis of the file buttressed that conclusion. The mole's first letter to the KGB was dated October 1, 1985, and mailed from a Washington suburb. Although Hansen was then assigned to New York, FBI records showed he was in Washington on that day. In May 1990, the mole told the Russians that he would be going on more trips. That was the year that Hansen traveled as an agent in the inspection division, including his jaunt to Hong Kong with Priscilla Sue Gailey. In November 1991, Hansen had been promoted to unit chief at higher pay. A month later, he told the KGB he had received a salary increase and more authority. There were several references to Chicago, Hansen's birthplace. Now Hansen was the FBI's target, with a new code name, Gray Day. Mr. Pym was safely in the U.S. Some members of his family had also gotten out. And the $7 million was his, to be paid over a period of time. Checking the plastic bag for fingerprints was not completed until mid-December. 2 latent fingerprints were found on the bag. They belonged to Robert Philip Hansen. There had been little question for several weeks that the mole was indeed Robert Hansen, but now with the fingerprints, the Bureau had solid forensic evidence. It would have been difficult for even the most skilled defense lawyer to explain what Hansen's prints were doing on a plastic bag deposited in a secret file inside the KGB in Moscow. Although the FBI had followed a false trail for 3 years, because of Mike Rochford's persistence, it had pulled off an unprecedented counterintelligence feat. Nothing like it had ever happened before. The Bureau had engineered Mr. Pym's travel to New York and had managed to pull off the seemingly impossible: to extract a file on the most damaging mole in the history of the FBI from one of the most guarded buildings in Russia, the headquarters of the KGB's Foreign Intelligence Service in Yasenevo.